I now have the great pleasure of introducing Marianne de Backer up to the stage. Why don't you come up and join, and we'll get ourselves comfortable, get the water while I do the introductory bits, which is always the fun part from my point of view, and then we ask some questions. And so this session is looking at the new era of partnering and investing. Do you want some water?
That would be great. Thank you.
And so Marianne obviously has a very illustrious career before Bayer, where she is now. She was at J&J. But at Bayer, she's the head of pharmaceutical strategy, business development and licensing and open innovation, and a member of the executive committee. So it's quite a long title, Marianne. In summary, what does that actually mean? What do you bring to Bayer for you? What does it cover?
Yeah, I'm really there to set out a growth strategy for the pharmaceuticals group and focus on, building a pipeline through external innovation.
Okay, well, it's great to have you on, and I think we're keen to sort of dive into some of those sort of conversational points. One thing that we do, and obviously we're delighted to have Bayer as well as J&J and others as part of the sort of global healthcare group. We have a council, the Global Healthcare Council, which is chaired by Bill Taranto at Merck and Rob Coppedge of Echo Health Ventures, and they kind of try to understand some of the sort of more value chain issues within healthcare more broadly. But if we dive down into particularly how you see this sort of new era partnership sort of forming, what investments have, I suppose, surprised you or impressed you, as you think about the biotech sphere in the past year or so?
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And, a real pleasure to be here. This is my first, real in-person conference since March 2020. I mean, I cannot believe you're three-dimensional. It's unbelievable.
I look better on print, put it that way.
So, I'm not saying anything. But I mean, obviously a great question. So maybe a first one that surprised me, and you might look at it as either, silly or scary, is this 15 million investment in Colossal. And Colossal is a company based in Boston, and they set out to de-extinct the woolly mammoth. And they immediately, within days, raised $15 million. And, the reason why this is so surprising, I mean, it really puts an exclamation mark on how far we have come in biotechnology. Because what they are really doing, this company, they are taking skin cells from an Asian elephant, they're transforming them in induced pluripotent stem cells, then they transform those into egg cells, and then they use CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing to bring in, woolly mammoth genes that they have sequenced from, remnants they found in the permafrost to create this new animal, right, and to de-extinct the woolly mammoth. So, I mean, we are using all these technologies on a daily basis in our company and in our industry, right, gene editing and iPSC-based cell therapies to come up with treatments and cures. But, this is an example of, how this all has really gone mainstream, and there's all these, different ways to deploy them. Also some things that really make you think, right? Should you de-extinct animals? I'm not so sure. Anyway, so that I thought was surprising, and it gets financed very, very easily, right, through the VC community. The other thing, speaking from the perspective of a big pharma that is looking to access innovation, obviously often through buying companies, what we saw this year is that there's these totally new players entering the game of healthcare, and also driven by the COVID pandemic. I mean, who would have thought that a company like 23andMe, would go public through Richard Branson's Virgin Group, SPAC. So I mean, obviously we were looking at 23andMe as an interesting company. I mean, for people who don't know it, it's a company that they send you a kit, you spit in a tube, you send it back. 6 weeks later, they have sequenced your genome. They tell you what kind of genes you're carrying that might be, predictive of disease. They tell you something about your ancestry. And in acquiring all that data, they also can come up with, identification of new targets for disease. So it's an interesting company, but who would have thought that a player like Virgin Group would come in and make that company public. And we see more and more of that. Another example is Ginkgo Bioworks. I mean, that's a company that basically uses microbes to, produce anything that you can imagine, therapeutics, but also materials, food, and so on. And they were also de-SPAC'd by Soaring Eagle Corporation, which is basically, a company by Harry Sloan that normally focuses on esports and gaming and the gaming industry. But now all these players are entering, the healthcare space. And for us, again, as a big pharma company looking to access innovation, those companies are not available anymore to acquire that easily. I mean, Ginkgo Bioworks was valued at $15 billion, one of the biggest, you can't call it an IPO, but going public on the New York Stock Exchange. And so what that means is that we as corporates really need to go very early in investing. And so our corporate venture arm, Leaps, does exactly that. We have now 1.6 billion deployed across, early investments that are relevant for our future business.
Well, it's impressive examples, and actually we have a great deal to thank you and your peers in the sort of the biotech world, because we're here thanks to sort of the vaccines and the discoveries, and being able to test it. It just shows the power and speed, I suppose. But I suppose when you think about that speed, what or how or why has COVID perhaps opened up new areas or new avenues that perhaps you wouldn't have seen, before COVID in terms of the development cycle?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we have been in this tug of war, with pathogens as humans since our existence, right? And every time, luckily, it's through the ingenuity of science and technology that we win that war over and over and over again. However, I think this pandemic was so global. I mean, if you look at it, there have been so many outbreaks, Nipah, MERS, SARS before, Ebola, but this has gone really global. And I think it really changed something, right? I mean, global public health was really seen as something that is not something far away from us, but actually something that is worth investing in. And it is worth investing in because it determines our health of the future. So we have seen an incredible change as a result of that. I mean, the level of investment, as you know, and as I'm sure we will be talking a lot about it here, has soared. I mean, just in the 6 months of this year, I mean, more than $50 billion has already been deployed in healthcare. More than 20 billion has been raised again only in the US, right, to deploy to healthcare. So a lot of interest is now in this space that wasn't there before. And also, so you have a much more level of capital. You have totally new players coming in. And what has also changed is our focus. So in the past, I can tell you, infectious diseases was something that very few investors were interested in, right? So that has changed. There's a lot of investment going in infectious diseases, which is really, really good. We also see an incredible amount of investment going into diagnostics. And again, having been working in the pharma industry for 30 years, it was really, really difficult for payers, for example, to see the value of diagnostics. And also, as a consequence, also for investors to see the value in diagnostics. And that has now totally changed, right? I mean, the focus on prevention is there, and there's a lot of money going into diagnostics and tools for prevention. And then finally, I mean, because we were all not able to go to the hospital and to see physicians in real life, the whole health tech area has, gotten an incredible amount of investment for alternative care, for example. So home care, telemedicine, diagnosing disease in a different way. I mean, so that level of investment has also really soared. So this, I think post-COVID leaves us actually in a much better place. Honestly, I also believe that we are here in UK, so not really Europe, but
We still consider ourselves part of Europe,
okay, good,
even
good.
if some of the politicians
Right.
don't. Yes.
Yeah, but I think it was a wake-up call also for Europe, right? How far behind we were in digitalization, and now, we see these investments going where they really should be going. So I think it's great progress.
That's really exciting to hear. I mean, you talk about that sort of global healthcare and the challenge that everyone's faced. How do you see the sort of public and private partnerships? Because obviously, in some ways, it felt like it was the sort of big corporates such as Bayer, working with the startups, and that link was very strong. And perhaps the government piece was a bit more to one side. So, how do you see that public-private partnerships developing?
Yeah, I mean, so public-private partnerships have, of course, always been very important in the infectious disease space before, in HIV, and in the US, especially with BARDA. That is an organization that really looks at future threats to, the United States, and they have always invested and always worked with corporates to be prepared and to invest money in areas that otherwise would get no attention. But clearly, the pandemic there was this one incredible threat to our society, and there was no way that only big pharma or only biotech or only government or only academia or whatever was going to solve it. So everyone had to really pull together and work towards a solution. So again, I think here in Europe we are now thinking about a HERA incubator, which is something similar to BARDA. So I think these public-private partnerships have hopefully gone mainstream, right, and will help to get investments again in those global public health areas that are relevant for all of us, but where in the past there was very little attention for.
That's good to hear. Now, we heard earlier from Sir Ronald about how the invisible heart is driving the invisible hand, how that sort of risk, return and impact is becoming more important. How do you see the sort of ethics play out within the sort of healthcare industry in terms of as we move towards perhaps a more personalised healthcare, in terms of control of data and other issues? What's the ethical driver that you see?
Yeah, so I must say in Bayer over the last 18 months or so, we have really worked to become a leader, for example, in the cell and gene therapy space. So we have a company, Blue Rock, that works on iPSC-based cell therapies for Parkinson. We acquired AskBio, which is a gene therapy company, working in some of these monogenetic rare diseases. We are, doing a lot of deals in the gene editing space, and and we've, done partnerships in CAR-T, and again, that all brings you in the realm of personalized medicine, very expensive personalized medicines and treatments, and hopefully also cures. There's another dimension, though. For me, it was a real wake-up call when in 2018 the news came out that a Chinese scientist had for the very first time gene-edited babies, the germline, of babies, and used CRISPR gene editing to change the CCR5 gene as a sort of carrier for, or something that would prevent HIV in those babies. So we are now at a level of technology that we can actually really, if you haven't read the book from Jamie Metzl about hacking Darwin, we now are getting to a point where we have these technologies in hand, for example, gene editing technologies, to hack Darwin, to play God, if you will. That level of advancement obviously brings great responsibility. So we are, as an industry, together with governments, really working, and thinking around how do we, self-regulate all of this, because, we're going to have treatments with incredible high prices. You're going to have technology that not allows you only to gene edit, to cure a disease, for example, but to really improve humankind in ways, right? And we see people now, I don't know if you've heard about the biohackers.
Yeah.
You don't just have the hackers in the computer industry, but now we see more and more biohackers that are using, CRISPR gene editing in their garage and creating their own COVID vaccine at home and things like that. So, I mean, obviously, there's an incredible responsibility that is with all of us to make sure that these incredible tools are going to be used for good.
Yeah.
And that we create a framework to help put this into an ethical perspective.
Well, they always say the only two things is certainty in life are death and taxes, and perhaps only one of those is now the case, given that we've got a global corporate tax deal in place, but maybe death will be cracked at stage. So that's really good to hear. I certainly think some of the issues around how you edit the germline, not just for the individual for their development, but also for future generations, how that can be passed down. It's a huge issue that will affect us all. But as you look ahead, what do you see maybe some of the investment issues for 2022 and beyond? And I suppose the final 5 minutes just kind of sum up some of the things that are exciting you looking ahead, Maria.
Right, sure. Well, I mean, I'm a biotechnologist myself, and I must say that there has sort of never been a more exciting time. I mean, every single week there is an innovation that you say, wow, I mean, this is incredible. So we find ourselves in this bio-revolution, and at the same time we have this revolution ongoing in AI and data sciences and machine learning, and these, two streams are converging. So, this twin revolution brings incredible opportunity. And we find ourselves in a situation now where there's incredible innovation. There has never been more capital available, for innovation than ever before. So that, of course, bodes extremely well for us, in the industry. I mean, that innovation will get translated into solutions that are going to be relevant for us as, patients, etc. So what we think is going to happen, and you already see it happening, and I talked about it a bit before, is it's going to be much more focused on prevention. Yeah. I personally also think that if our future generations are going to look back on us, they're going to think, my God, why did they wait until they were sick, right? Why did they not identify the disease much earlier and then try to intercept it? And now we're getting to technologies like the one, that Grail has, where, you can take a blood sample, you can look at your circulating tumor DNA, and many years before your tumor is visible, you can know something is coming here, and you can try and do something about it. So, I mean, thinking about how do we prevent diseases rather than treat them, and then sort of the other end of the spectrum where we think much more investment is going to be is in curing diseases. Because now with gene therapies, gene editing and all these, you're going to be able to cure certain diseases and just take them away in one shot, right? And then, the investment that we have already seen in alternative care, that obviously we think is going to increase, and we're watching that space very, very closely. So, we invested in a number of digital health tech funds to really sort of monitor what is happening there. And one of our the chief scientific officer and founder of one of the companies we acquired, gene therapy companies we acquired, he always says you can't keep a racehorse in the barn. and it is true, I think, with this innovation. I mean, it is, the opportunities are really amazing, and it's great to be part of such an ecosystem where we can help through either, obviously investing in some of that innovation through our LEAPS arm, but also, acquiring some of these companies and then incubating them, and hopefully that's going to lead to a lot of great solutions for patients.
Well, wonderful to hear. We had a delegation of CVCs go up to Cambridge, had partnered with Cambridge Innovation Capital, and you just hear some of the amazing insights that are happening on there around the microbiome. And think about the person, it's not as a person, but as this wider entity when you think about the biome as well. It's just fascinating to see some of the developments, but great to hear firsthand at the cutting edge, Marianne, and what you guys at Bayer are doing. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.